Figure 7. Use the feeling wheel. Wilcox, 1982, to help you find the words to describe how you feel. Don't only focus on the negative emotions. Journaling is a helpful way to process and understand the experiences and emotions that happen to you. But journaling is not only helpful for making sense of number 22 cult experiences. It's also important to spend time writing about positive experiences, even small moments that felt positive. This is because every action is a specific number 2D earn of neural activity in the brain. When you repeat an activity over and over, that neural pathway is strengthened and becomes easier for your brain to access. So if you want to be able to more easily cultivate positive feelings, thoughts and memories, put into practice by keeping a journal. When you get practice at cultivating certain feelings and experiences in this way, it gets easier to access those feelings in the future. Chapter Summary. The language we use has a powerful number 1 effect on our experience of the world. The more words you have to describe how you feel, the number 2D If you don't have the words, you can use something like the feeling wheel to give you prompts. Notice the words others use, read books and explore the ways you can keep building your emotional vocabulary. Chapter 13. How to support someone. If you are supporting a loved one as they struggle with their mental health, it is quite possible that you feel completely inadequate. You don't know how to fix it, you're not sure what is the right thing to say. You want to make it all okay for them, but you can't, so you feel lost, desperately wanting to help and not knowing how. When someone we love is number 1 earring, sometimes the stress that it brings up can give us the urge to escape how we feel about their pain. But when we do that, we can feel even more helpless and paralyzed because we stop ourselves from providing even some low-level support that could help us to feel more confident in the supporting role. Inagaki et al., 2012. While there are no hard and fast rules for supporting someone through mental health problems, there are a few things that can help along the way. 1. When we focus on trying to fix the problem, it is easy to underestimate the power of simply being there. Most people don't want to be told what to do, but they do want someone to keep showing up to check in and show they care. 2. If the loved one has a specific diagnosis, it can help to learn about how it number 1 affects them and get more specific advice on the challenges they are facing. 3. Don't forget that the person you are supporting will have an idea of what they need. So asking them how they would like you to support them can help to give you guidance, while also communicating to them that you are listening. 4. Caring for someone can put a strain on your own mental health. But you cannot support them at your best if your mental health starts to deteriorate. So it is absolutely imperative that you prioritize your own health too, even in small ways. Keep a close eye on the basics. Keep track of your sleep, routine, nutritional intake, exercise and social contact. 5. Get your own support. Whether it be someone you trust, a support group or a professional, having a safe space to talk about your own feelings and think about how to move forward can help to stop you burning out. 6. Set boundaries. Supporting someone else does not mean that your life no longer number 2D number 2D in clarity on your own values can help to keep you going when things get tough, but also to ensure that you can maintain some balance. 7. Work on a crisis plan. If the person you are caring for ever feels unsafe, then it is important to have a crisis plan. It doesn't need to be complex. Acknowledge any early warning signs that things may be deteriorating and list the things that both of you can do to ensure everybody's safety in that scenario. Having a WRI number 2D and plan with all the numbers you need to call makes it easier to do what you need to in a crisis. 8. It is easy to underestimate the power of listening with compassion, kindness and curiosity. The problems may not disappear when you do that, but you are helping that person to feel cared for and less alone, which greatly improves their chances of recovery. Social support is a powerful tool and it does not need to come with all the answers, just a big dose of compassion. 9. Supporting someone does not mean that you have to connect with big, intense conversations. Human connection in the smallest of moments number 2D Walking while you are talking can help those who feel uncomfortable with opening up. You can also say nothing at all. Simply spending time together, even in silence, is okay. By being there, you are helping them to feel less alone and more cared for. 10. If you are trying to help that person open up about their struggles, using open questions that ask for more than a yes or no answer can help. For example, rather than, "Are you okay?" try, "What are you thinking?" 11. Listen carefully. Don't owe number 1 or advice unless they ask for it. Just reflect back what you hear them saying, let them know they are being heard and respected. 12. If that person talks about feeling hopeless or helpless, says that they cannot see a way out, or you become concerned about their safety, always seek professional advice. 13. Don't underestimate the power of practical help. If someone is facing struggles with mental health, physical health, pre- and postnatal periods, or grief, all of these can make the usual day-to-day tasks more number 22 cult. For example, helping someone to eat a few healthy meals each week by turning up with a homemade dinner is a great way to support a loved one. 14. Being sensitive to situations in which your loved one may feel especially vulnerable, or asking them if you don't know, means that you can be there for them when they most need it. For example, if a loved one is recently bereaved and has to number 2D and a social function alone for the first time, don't avoid them. Lean in and show them love and kindness. Those situations will still be hard, but feeling less alone can mean everything. 15. It's okay to change the subject. Being around someone does not mean you have to focus on their struggles the whole time. Distraction can be a welcome relief that they might find number 22 cult to achieve when alone. 16. Have no expectations about their healing or recovery. It is never smooth and linear. There will be good days and bad days. Being surrounded by loved ones who are accepting of those ups and downs over the years will help them to do the same. 17. Be honest. If you want to be supportive but you are not sure how, say that out loud. Ask the person to let you know if you are saying or doing something that is not helpful. This openness allows everyone to feel less anxious and to truly connect, knowing that the situation is working for everyone. Chapter Summary. It is normal to feel overwhelmed or inadequate when supporting someone with mental health problems. You want to fix it but you don't know how. Leaning in to support someone who is number 1F earing can be stressful as you don't want to say the wrong thing. But don't avoid them. You don't have to fix everything to be a great support. Look at number 2C, yourself to prevent burnout. Get your own support and set clear boundaries. Never underestimate the power of listening. Chapter 14. Understanding grief. We number 2C and associate grief with the death of a loved one. But we can grieve at other times too. Endings that feel significant to us can trigger a grief reaction, even if the ending was not caused by death. We have fought our way through a pandemic that changed our lives. Along the way we lost friends, family, livelihoods, jobs, family businesses built over generations. We lost financial security, final moments with loved ones, and precious time to hold and be close to them. We lost a sense of certainty about what the future holds, and access to the social support that would help us cope with that. The profound losses experienced by so many have changed the world and let number 2C a psychological fallout that is heavy with grief. For anyone feeling the number 1F ECTS of a loss, these are some things to remember. Grief is normal. I have met so many people who tell themselves that they are failing at life because they are struggling to cope with grief. They make broad judgments about their strength of character, as if grief is a disorder or a problem they should have fixed. Grief is a normal part of human experience. It is a necessary process to go through when we experience the loss of someone or something that we loved, needed, felt connected to and that held meaning in our life. Sadness can be a part of grief. But there is much more to grief than sadness. It can be a deep yearning for the person who is gone. Relationships are at the core of what it means to be human. Among the people I have met in my career so far, their human connections have been the most meaningful aspects of their lives. When the relationship ends, the need for that connection doesn't stop. Your body grieves too. As explained in previous chapters, everything we think and feel happens within the body. Grief is no number 1F errant. The loss of a loved one is a huge psychological and physical threat. The pain can feel both emotional and physical. The stress response is repeatedly triggered. In talking about things that help us through grief, let's be clear on what help means. Things that help do not make the pain disappear or make us forget or force us to let go. Help might be as simple as finding out that the roller coaster of emotions you feel is normal. It might be finding new ways to sit with and process the pain in a safe and healthy way. Grief can feel intolerable. It makes absolute sense that our most natural human response to that might be to block it out. The pain is so intense and vast that it is terrifying. So we push it away if we can. But when we block one emotion, we tend to block them all. We can be let number 2C feeling hollow, numb and struggling to find meaning and to engage with life in the way we once did. If we find a way to push it all down under the surface, maybe by keeping really busy, numbing ourselves with alcohol or with denial of what has happened, we may feel like we're doing okay. Then something small that seems insignificant blows the lid number 1F, and this world of pain explodes, leaving us in shock and questioning whether we can cope. Unresolved grief is associated with depression, suicidality and alcohol abuse, Zizuk and Lyons, 1990. So denying our grief and pushing it away feels like self-protection but in the longer term can be the opposite. How easy it is to say all this. How hard it is in reality to experience it. When we block out pain, it is for good reason. An ocean of grief as deep as it is wide, it feels too big, too much, never ending. How do we possibly face something like that? We can start by understanding what to expect. We can also make sure we get to know what helps us navigate the experience. Then we take things one experience at a time. We take a few strides into that ocean of grief. We feel it. We breathe. We step back and rest for a moment. Over time we learn to take more steps, go deeper, immerse ourselves, knowing that we can safely return to the shore. Feeling the grief does not make it disappear. But we build up our strength to know that we can be reminded and yet still return to engage with life as it is today. Chapter Summary. Endings that feel significant can trigger a grief reaction, even if the end was not caused by death. Grief is a normal and natural part of being human. The pain can feel both emotional and physical. Things that help do not make the pain disappear or force you to let go. Trying to completely block out grief can lead to problems further down the line. Chapter 15. The stages of grief. You might have heard about the stages of grief as originally described by Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, 1969. Since then, it has been established that they are not experienced in stages and they do not happen in any particular order or time frame. But they do describe some of the most common experiences that can be a part of normal, healthy grief. It is important to remember that these are not a prescription for how you should be grieving. They are not a rule book for the best type of grieving. They are descriptions of experiences you might notice along the way. So if you recognize any of them in your own experience, or in a loved one, you know these are a part of normal, healthy grief. Denial. Denial and shock can help us survive the overwhelming pain of grief. It does not mean that we deny any of it is happening. But there may be a gradual pacing of how you take on board the situation you are facing and the new reality that awaits you, whether you chose it or not. Over time, denial begins to fade and this allows new waves of emotion to surface. Anger. Underneath anger is number 2C, an intense pain or fear. When we allow ourselves to truly feel that anger and express it, we can bring those other emotions to the surface and work on them. But many people have been taught to fear anger and to feel ashamed of expressing it. So we hold it under the surface, but like holding air underwater, it soon bubbles up in another time or place. An outburst at a friend or doctor or family member that appears out of character. Anger is there to agitate us to move and make something happen. When we experience anger about something that we cannot control, using physical movement helps us to use that physiological arousal in the way it was designed to be used. Venting in that way can be helpful to use up that energy generated by anger and bring ourselves back down to baseline, at least for a while. Once the body is calm, you are then more able to access the cognitive function necessary to get clarity on your thoughts and feelings or any problem solving to be done. It can be helpful to do that with a trusted friend or loved one who can support you, or by writing things down. We know from the research that ruminating alone on angry feelings can make the anger and aggression more intense rather than less. Bushman, 2002. Trying to do any sort of deep relaxation exercise before you have used physical action to move through the anger and bring your level of arousal back down may be too deep. Number 22. Cult. But once you have expressed it in any way that best suits you, using guided relaxations can be helpful to replenish the body and mind until the next wave of anger arrives. Bargaining. Maybe this occurs in fleeting moments. Maybe it's hours or days spent ruminating over the what if, and if only thoughts. This can easily lead down a path towards self-blame. We start to wonder what could have been D. Number 1 F errant if we had made D. Number 1 F errant choices at D. Number 1 F errant times. We may start bargaining with a god, if we have one, or the universe. Or maybe we promise to do things D. Number 1 F errantly from now on and devote our life to making things be. Number 2 D. In some way, trying desperately in our mind to make it all okay again. We just want things back the way they were. Depression. The word depression here is used to describe that deep loss, an intense sadness and emptiness, that follows at number 2 C. A bereavement. This is a normal reaction to loss and does not necessarily indicate a mental illness. Depression is a normal response to a depressing situation. Sometimes people around us can feel frightened by it and naturally want to fix it or cure it, or worse, want you to snap out of it. But recognizing depression is a normal part of healthy grief means that we can try to soothe ourselves through that pain and work hard to re-engage with normal life and look at number 2 C. Our well-being as much as we can. The ideas and tools covered in section 1 still apply here, but we also don't have to deny pain, or push it down and hide it, as I will explain later. Acceptance. When we give grief the time and space it needs, we begin to feel more able to step forward and play an active part in life again. Acceptance can be misunderstood as agreeing with or liking the situation. That is not true. In acceptance, the new reality is still not okay. It is still not as we want it to be. But we begin to take on the new reality, listen to our needs, open up to new experiences and make connections. It is also important to point out that acceptance is not an endpoint in grief. It might be fleeting moments in which you have found a way to live in this new reality. There may be other moments when you return to bargaining and yearning for that person. Going back and forth between these states is normal, and it's to be expected as you face all the new challenges and experiences in your life. This means if you have started to find new moments of contentment or joy, things seem to be going okay, and then you find yourself overwhelmed with a wave of anger or sadness or anything else, that does not mean you have gone backwards. You are not number 2 D in grief, wrong. Grief comes in waves that we can't always predict. Chapter summary. Denial can help us survive the overwhelming pain of grief. As denial fades, this allows new waves of emotion to surface. When we experience anger about something we can't control, using physical movement helps us to use the physiological arousal and bring the body back down to calm for a while. Ruminating over the what ifs can easily lead down a path of self-blame. Depression is a normal reaction at number 2 C. A bereavement. Acceptance is not the same as liking or agreeing with the situation. Chapter 16. The tasks of mourning. So how do we begin to get through this intense, confusing and number 2 C and chaotic experience that we call grief? William Worden, 2011, described what he thought were the 4 tasks of mourning. 1. To find some acceptance in the new reality at number 2 C. The loss. 2. To work through the pain of grief. 3. To adjust to an environment in which that loved one is missing. Chapter 16. The tasks of mourning. So how do we begin to get through this intense, confusing and number 2 C and chaotic experience that we call grief? William Worden, 2011, described what he thought were the 4 tasks of mourning. 1. To find some acceptance in the new reality at number 2 C. The loss. 2. To work through the pain of grief. 3. To adjust to an environment in which that loved one is missing. 4. To find a way to keep a connection with them in a new way while also engaging in life as it is now. At number 2 C. A loss, people deal with their grief in D. Number 1 F errant ways. While some are oriented towards feeling the pain and emotions that arise, others focus on trying their best to distract themselves from the overwhelming emotions. Neither of these are wrong. In fact, we need both. We cannot work through grief all in one go and feel that much emotional pain without rest. But we cannot do the work through grief without allowing ourselves the space to feel it. So the work becomes a process of movement between feeling the pain and replenishing the body and mind with something distracting or comforting that allows you a break between the waves of emotion. Strobe and Schutt, 1999. So spending time with the emotions that come up, whether you made an active choice to go there, by looking in a memory box or visiting a memorial, or if that emotion rose up without choice, is a necessary part of that process. It allows the feelings to unfold and be expressed, through talking, writing, or weeping. When you feel you need to step back from that, it helps to turn your number 2 D attention to something that brings the stress response back down. Using the self-soothing skills from section 3 can be helpful, see page 109, especially when the pain has been overwhelming. Grounding techniques may also be helpful here. But there is no set prescription, as every individual, every relationship and therefore every grieving process is unique. The key is to find something safe that allows you some time for restoration, even if that time is short. One of the problems with it, trying to get on with it, mode and not allowing ourselves to focus on the loss at any point is that it can take relentless number one effort, and there is no break from that. We might then need to stay busy for fear of being overwhelmed if we press pause. So we become stuck. We're not able to rest because the work of keeping the pain at arm's length is constant. When pain is vast, the actions we take to push it down and keep it under the surface can cause damage to both the individual and their relationships. If you disconnect with one emotion, you disconnect from them all. Feel whatever is there. It is okay, when you are grieving, to feel everything. It is okay to feel despair. It is okay to feel rage. It is okay to feel confused. It is also okay to feel joy. It is okay to smile if that is where the moment takes you. It is okay to enjoy the warm sun on your face for a moment, or laugh at someone's joke. It is all okay. It is normal to feel guilty when you start to allow yourself to live again, but allowing small moments of joy to wash over you is just as important to the process of grieving as allowing the pain to. Over time we learn to engage with life and recognize that does not mean forge. Number 2D-ing. The love and connection continues. Small steps forward every day. Do not underestimate the power of the smallest steps forward. If standing upright and washing your face every day feels like a number 2D, then let washing your face each morning become the current goal. Meet each chapter from where you are and push it where it moves. No expectations. Expectations about how you should feel, how you should behave, and how quickly you should heal, only make grief harder. Many of those expectations come from a history of our misunderstanding about grief as a taboo subject. Thanks to some pioneers in this area of research, we now have a much number 2D, or understanding of the process of grief and how to help ourselves through it. The expectations lead people to falsely believe that they are going mad, number 2D-ing it all wrong, weak and alone. In reality, all the feelings, the ups and downs, are all a normal part of the process. The lack of conversation about grief leads us to worry about whether we are number 2D-ing it right. The opposite to this, and a much more helpful approach, is cultivating a compassionate connection with yourself and others. One that allows you to express your feelings in a safe place. Expression. Expressing how you feel is not always easy. Some have the urge to talk. Others clam up and can't find the words. If you want to talk, find someone whom you trust and start talking. If you have all of those very normal fears of being a burden, number 2D-ing the other person, say so. A good friend will tell you what they can manage. If you cannot talk, write. In whatever way the words come to you. The act of number 2D-ing those thoughts and feelings out onto the page can help to unravel some of what is going on in your mind and body. It is through the processing of those painful feelings that the work of grieving is done. Some people find expression through painting, music, movement or poetry. Whatever number 1F is a safe avenue for you to release and express that raw emotion is worth making time and space for. If you are not sure where to start, just start with anything that comes naturally to you. Start with the thing that has helped in the past. Or start with something just because you are curious about how it might be. If you don't have a therapist to hold the boundaries for you, this is something you can do to ensure that you step into and back out of the emotion. There is a time to feel and a time to block, a time for turning towards and a time for turning away to rest your mind and body. So if you are going to spend some time releasing and expressing that emotion, have those safety nets that help you back. Remember and keep living. When remembering someone causes pain, and engaging in the present without them causes pain, the two experiences can feel at war with each other. The demands of life keep coming and just one memory can crop up and bring you to your knees. Perhaps one of the things that changes over time with grief is the bringing together of these two things. Or the discovery, through trying, of a way the two needs can coexist. The need to engage in life and the need to remember and stay connected with the person lost. This could be making time for moments that celebrate their life, spending time in rituals that help you to continue your relationship with them, while also making deliberate choices every day to live in a way that honors both past and future. The work of grief appears to be about stepping into your pain, allowing it to wash over you, soothing and supporting yourself through it, and stepping out of it again and into life as it is now, finding ways to rest and nourish your body and mind through the exhaustion of grief. Samuel, 2017. Grow around the wound. The wound that is number 2C following a loss is not something to be fixed or healed. We do not want to forget that person, we want to remember them and continue to feel connected to them. So the wound does not diminish or disappear. It remains while we work hard to build a life around it. Rondo, 1993. This is a concept that many people find helpful in therapy. The person is just as important to you as they ever were and so the pain of losing them continues. But we find a way to acknowledge their life while beginning to grow and create a life with meaning and purpose alongside that grief. You find ways to remember, celebrate and feel your connection to that person, and to keep living. You learn that pain and joy, despair and meaning can all be a part of life. You learn what you are capable of surviving, the depths from which you can pull yourself up, and from that, you keep going. When to get professional help. Going to a counselor or therapist does not mean you are number 2D-ing the grief thing wrong. We need support to get us through the pain of grief, but not everybody has someone that they trust or want to talk openly with. The therapy room can become a sanctuary, a safe space to release raw emotion with someone who is trained to sit firm with you through that. The therapist can help you to make sense of things, use skills to help you manage safely, understand more about grief, and listen in a way you have never been listened to before, without judgment, advice or number 2D empts to minimize and fix things for you. A therapist knows that the work of grief is through the pain, and their work is to walk through it with you and number 1F are a guide when you need it. Chapter Summary. Grief demands that we work through the pain. It takes time to adjust to a life in which a loved one is missing. We need to find a way to keep that connection going with the loved one without their physical presence. Acceptance of the new reality means we can continue to engage with the things that 2D are to us. Whatever you feel, it's okay to feel that. Do not underestimate small steps and steady progress. Chapter 17. The Pillars of Strength. The grief psychotherapist Julia Samuel set out the key structures that support us to rebuild our lives through grief, 2017. She calls them pillars of strength because they take work and persistence to build. By nurturing each of them, we gain a stable structure to help us through. The pillars of strength are listed below. 1. Relationship with the person who has died. 1. Relationship with the person who has died. When we lose a loved one, our relationship and love for that person does not end. Adapting to the loss involves finding new ways to feel close to the loved one. For example, visiting a special place that you shared or spending time at a grave or memorial. 2. Relationship with the self. Every other section in this book touches on self-awareness, and working through grief demands the same. In understanding our own coping mechanisms, finding ways to get support and look at number 2C, or our health and well-being throughout, we must listen to our own needs as best we can along the way. 3. Expressing grief. There is no correct way to express grief. If you prefer to do that through quiet reflection, memorials or sharing with friends, the act of allowing yourself to feel whatever comes up and expressing that helps the natural process. When emotions are especially overwhelming, you can make use of the skills O, number 1F, ERD in section 3 to help, see page 99. 4. Time. Put number 2D ing an expectation on how much time you should need for grief is say, number 2D ing yourself up for struggle. When everything is overwhelming, it helps to focus only on each day as it comes until you feel strong enough to take a broader view of the future. Adding pressure to feel a certain way in a particular time frame only adds pain and distress. 5. Mind and body. As I covered in section 1, our physical state, emotions, thoughts and actions are like weaves in a basket, see page 53. We cannot change one without influencing the other. This makes taking care of all of those aspects of our experience even more important. Regular exercise, eating well and ensuring we maintain some social contact will all help us to strengthen our mental health when we most need it. 6. Limits. When loved ones around us may be full of advice about how we should be managing and when we should be GE, number 2D, ing back into everyday life, remembering our capacity for holding boundaries becomes an essential tool. If we are building self-awareness and listening to our own needs, sometimes we need to put boundaries in place and maintain them in order to do what is in our best interests. 7. Structure. I have spoken in previous chapters about our human need for balance between predictability and adventure, structure and flexibility. When our mental health becomes vulnerable at number 2C, or a loss, it makes sense to O, number 1F, or a degree of flexibility that allows for grieving, while also maintaining some level of structure and routine that helps prevent deterioration of your mental health from the absence of healthy behaviors such as exercise and social contact. 8. Focusing. When there are not enough words to describe the sensations that we feel, focusing our number 2D attention on simply observing our internal world and visualizing those sensations in the body can help to build awareness of our own number 2CS in emotional and physical state. Chapter summary. We can rebuild a life at number 2C, or a bereavement with time, work and persistence. Create new ways you can feel close to your loved one with a special place or memorial. Listen to your needs as much as you can along the way. There is no correct way to express grief. Drop any expectations about how much time you should spend grieving. Chapter 18. Dealing with criticism and disapproval. Criticism and disapproval is something we all have to face at some point. But nobody ever really teaches us how to deal with it in a way that allows that feedback to enhance our life instead of destroying our self-esteem. Even the anticipation of criticism or disapproval can be enough to cause a paralysis in our ability to strive for things that number 2D, are most to us. So not having the skills to deal with criticism or disapproval in a healthy way can cost you. Now, this chapter is not about to tell you to just stop caring what anyone else thinks of you. In fact, we are built to care about how we are being perceived by those around us. Criticism can be a sign that we haven't lived up to expectation in some way and sometimes, but not always, can signal a risk of rejection or abandonment. So receiving criticism will naturally trigger your stress response. That response gears us up, ready to do something about it. Historically, rejection from our community was a serious threat to our survival. These days, things are number 1F, errant in some ways, but similar in others. Rejection and loneliness continue to be a big threat to our health and the brain continues doing its job of trying to keep us safe in a group. Beyond simply keeping us safe, our capacity to imagine what others might think of us is a key skill that helps us to function in the social groups that we live in. We develop our sense of self and identity, not only from our own experience and how we interact with others, but also through what we imagine those other people really think of us, the ideas and perceptions they might have of us. This is called the looking glass self, Cooley, 1902. So it makes sense that what I believe you think of me is going to influence what I do next. So when we try to tell ourselves to just stop caring what anyone else thinks, even if we feel a momentary boost, the impact of that is number 2C and short-lived at best. People pleasing. People pleasing is more than just being nice to people. Anyone would recommend being nice to people. But people pleasing is a number 2D of behavior in which you consistently put all others before yourself even to the detriment of your own health and well-being. It can leave us feeling unable to express our needs, likes and dislikes, and unable to hold boundaries or even keep ourselves safe. We say yes, when actually we want and need to say no. We feel resentful of being taken advantage of, but unable to change it by asking for anything number 1F errant. And the fear of disapproval never disappears because there is always the possibility of number 2D, ing a foot wrong, making a wrong choice and displeasing someone, even if that person is someone we don't like or spend time with. While it is in us all to care about the approval of our peers, people-pleasing takes it much further. If we grow up in an environment in which it is not safe to disagree or express number 1F errants, if disapproval is expressed with rage or contempt, then as children we learn how to survive that environment. Keeping other people happy becomes a survival skill that we hone and perfect throughout childhood. It is only later, as adults, that those behavior number 2D earns become detrimental to our relationships. We second-guess every move we make, always tentatively trying to work out what others are expecting of us. It may even prevent us from making new connections as we hold back on interactions when there is no guarantee that the other person likes us back. Living a life of people-pleasing is further complicated by the fact that other people don't always voice their disapproval with criticism. We can fear and feel disapproval even when the other person never says a word. When we don't have that information, our mind starts to fill in the blanks for us. The spotlight number 1F ECT is a term originally coined by Thomas Gilovich and Kenneth Savitsky, 2000, to describe the tendency of humans to overestimate how much others are focused on us. We are each at the center of our own spotlight of a number 2D engine, and we tend to imagine that others are focused on us too, when in reality, everyone's spotlights are usually on themselves. So we can number 2C and make the assumption that others are judging us negatively or disapproving when they may not be thinking about us at all. Those who feel socially anxious tend to focus their number 2D engine more on how they are being perceived by those around them. Clark and Wells, 1995. But those who feel more confident tend to have a more outward focus of a number 2D engine, leading with a curiosity for other people. So, if we have this brain that is set up to care a great deal what everyone else is thinking, or maybe we notice a tendency towards people-pleasing number 2D earns, how do we live alongside that? How do we ensure that we can have those meaningful relationships but not become trapped by constant worries about disapproval and judgment? And how can we pick ourselves back up when disapproval from someone else stops us from living in line with what number 2D earns to us? The tasks of dealing with criticism. Building up the ability to tolerate the criticism that could be helpful and use it to your advantage while maintaining a sense of self-worth. Being open to learning from negative feedback that could help you make progress. Learning to let go of criticisms that reflect the values of someone else rather than your own. Number 2D in clarity on which opinions number 2D are the most to you and why, so that it becomes easier to know when to reflect and learn and when to let go and move on. Understanding people. Most people who are highly critical of others tend to be highly critical of themselves also. It can reflect the way they have learned to speak to themselves and everyone else. They criticize because it is what they do, not necessarily because it is any reflection on your worthiness as a human being, especially when it is a very personal number 2D act on your character as opposed to anything that could be in any way helpful to you on your path. As humans we also have a tendency towards egocentric thinking, which can play out in our insistence that other people live by the same values and obey the same rules that we have set for ourselves. This means that criticism can number 2C and be based on the critical person's view of the world, neglecting the fact that we all have number 1F errant life experiences, values and personalities. Understanding that people tend to criticize others based on their own rules for living is helpful to remember, especially for anyone with that tendency towards people-pleasing. We want everyone's approval, but if each person is unique with their own ideas and views, then we simply cannot please everyone all of the time. If we have a close relationship with the person, then we are likely to value their opinions more, which can make the criticism more painful, but we also may have the insight to be number 2D or understand what lies behind the disapproval. Context is everything, but we don't always have access to it. When we don't have that context, it is much harder to see the criticism for what it is, one person's idea that is wrapped up in their own experiences. The natural instinct is to take on the criticism as a factual statement that says something about who we are and to start questioning our own self-worth. Nurturing self-worth. Not all criticism is bad. When feedback focuses on a specific behavior, we tend to feel guilty, which prompts us to correct our mistakes to repair the relationship. When criticism at number 2D acts our personality and our sense of worth as a person, we tend to feel that in the form of shame. Shame is the intensely painful feeling that can be mixed with other emotions like anger or disgust. It is number 1F errant from embarrassment, which is less intense and tends to be felt in public. Shame is much more painful. We feel unable to speak, think clearly or do anything. We want to disappear and hide. The sheer intensity of the physical reaction makes it number 22 cult to recover from. Shame triggers our threat system in such a way that it can feel like someone held a match to all our other emotions. So we get a rush of anger, fear or disgust to go along with it. Then the self at number 2D act comes swarming in like soldiers over a hill, coming at you with self-criticism, self-denigration and blame. With that sort of onslaught the instinct is to block it all out. But shame is not easy to ignore. So we go for the most absorbing, addictive behaviors that number 1F are instant relief. Shame resilience is something we can learn, but it is a life practice. Building resilience to shame does not mean you never feel it. Instead, it means we learn how to dust ourselves out, number 1F, and get back up. Being able to experience shame and come back from it without losing your sense of self-worth involves. Number 2D, to know what triggers shame for you. There are certain aspects of our lives and things we do that we perceive to be a part of who we are. That may be parenting or physical appearance or creativity. Anything that you link to your self-worth can give rise to shame. In order to build and maintain a sense of self-worth, we need to understand that our worthiness as a human being is not dependent on living mistake-free. Reality checking the criticism and all the judgments that follow. Whether it comes from someone else or inside your own head, judgments and opinions are not Whether it comes from someone else or inside your own head, judgments and opinions are not facts. They are narratives and stories that can significantly change our experience of the world. So looking at number 2C, your self-worth involves taking the name calling and personal at number 2D, X out of the equation and focusing on the specific concrete behaviors and their consequences. Reminding yourself that being imperfect, making mistakes or failing is all a part of being human. Making friends with your fallibility means that when you do fail you don't have to feel worthless. You can use each experience to your advantage by learning from it. Minding what you say. Criticism will always hurt. Elite number 2D, that is our brain doing its best to keep us safe. There is no antidote that makes it all okay forever and ever. Criticism's bouncing. Number 1F, your armor. What use is armor anyway, when the worst critic is in your own head? A harsh comment or criticism can leave you feeling winded. Of course, naturally, you then spend the next 5 hours rehearsing it again in your head. The brain wants to pay it number 2D attention to it because it is a threat. But each time you go over it in your mind, the stress response is triggered again. So one kick in the stomach can feel more like 100 kicks in the stomach. Time spent thinking over a helpful criticism that we can put to good use and that adds to the work we are doing in the world is time well spent. Ruminating and churning over a nasty comment with no sense of how this can help you is just a continuation of the at number 2D act on your character. Talking to yourself in the right way at number 2C a criticism. This is vital if you want to have the capacity to move through shame and bounce back. When we are in shame we may feel a sense of self-loathing, and we convince ourselves that we need to continue the at number 2D act. The idea of responding to ourselves with respect and compassion feels undeserved and indulgent, as if it would let you number 1F the hook and stop you bothering to try harder. But in reality, if you want a man to get up number 1F the ground, you have to stop beating him. The key to using all criticism to your advantage is having your own back, having so much self-compassion that you are able to listen to criticism and decide which of that criticism you will take on board and use to your advantage as a learning experience, and which voices number 1F are you nothing but dents in your self-esteem and crushed confidence. Talking about shame itself. Reach out to someone you trust and confide in them. Secrets, silence and judgment intensify shame. Sharing our experience with someone who responds with empathy helps us to leave shame behind and move on. Understanding you. Living the life you want to live in the face of criticism means number 2D, in clear on. The opinions that truly #2D are to you and why. Whose opinions number 2D are most to you. Saying, I don't care what anyone thinks is rarely true and hides a world of insecurities. It stops us creating meaningful connections with others because it closes number 1F any avenue of communication in which both voices number 2D are. But the list of whose opinions truly number 2D are needs to be small. It is also worth pointing out that acknowledging who number 2D ers does not mean it is your responsibility to please them. It just means you are willing to listen to their feedback, even when it is not praise, because you know it is likely to be honest and in your best interests, therefore most likely to be helpful. Why you do what you do. The one person you most need the approval of is you. When the way we are living is out of line with our values and what number 2D ers most, life stops feeling meaningful or satisfying. Understanding the kind of person you want to be and how you want to live your life, how you want to contribute to the world, is the road you want to stay close to. When you know exactly who you are and who you want to be, it is much easier to choose which criticisms to take on board and which ones to let go. Where those familiar critical voices are really coming from and whether they are warranted and helpful or detrimental to our well-being. When there is someone in your life who is predictably critical, you hear their voice before they even say anything. Over time we internalize their constant criticism so that it becomes the way we speak to ourselves. So we may be highly self-critical because we have learned to be. Recognizing that we learned that way of speaking to ourselves helps us to acknowledge that we can relearn a new internal dialogue that serves us be number 2D Chapter summary. Learning the skills to deal with criticism and disapproval in a healthy way is a crucial life skill. We are built to care what others think of us, so telling ourselves that we don't care is not the answer. People-pleasing is more than just being nice to people. It is the persistent placing of others' wants or needs above your own, even to the detriment of your own health and well-being. Understanding why some people are highly critical helps. Nurturing your own self-worth and resilience to shame is both possible and potentially life-altering. Chapter 19. The key to building confidence. As a teenager growing up in a small town, I thought of myself as a confident person. Then I let number 2C that small town and went number 1F to university over 100 miles away. But much of my confidence, which I thought was part of me, stayed at home. I was vulnerable, unsure of myself, not clear on who I needed to be to fit in. Over time, university life became the new normal and I built up my confidence, brick by brick, once again. At number 2C I graduated. I got a job as a researcher for an addiction service. Feeling confident to meet the demands of university was no longer enough. I needed to tolerate that vulnerable feeling once again in order to build up confidence in this new arena. The same happened when I began my clinical training, then at number 2C qualification, at number 2C the birth of my first child, when I started my own practice and again when I started making my work public on social media. With every turn I have ever made, the confidence that once seemed enough suddenly seems inadequate and vulnerability returns. Confidence is like a home that you build for yourself. When you go somewhere new, you must build a new one. But when we do, we're not starting from scratch. Every time we step into the unknown and try something new, experience that vulnerability, make mistakes, get through them and build some confidence, we move on to the next chapter with evidence that we can get through tough challenges. We bring with us the courage we need to take that leap of faith again and again. That same leap of faith the trapeze artist must take every time she lets go of one bar before grabbing the next one. She is always vulnerable, never completely safe, but each time she tries, she knows she can meet that risk with the courage needed to make it happen. To build confidence, go where you have none. Confident is not the same as comfortable. One of the biggest misconceptions about becoming self-confident is that it means living fearlessly. The key to building confidence is quite the opposite. It means we are willing to let fear be present as we do the things that #2D are to us. When we establish some self-confidence in something, it feels good. We want to stay there and hold on to it. But if we only go where we feel confident, then confidence never expands beyond that. If we only do the things we know we can do well, fear of the new and unknown tends to grow. Building confidence inevitably demands that we make friends with vulnerability because it is the only way to be without confidence for a while. But the only way confidence can grow is when we are willing to be without it. When we can step into fear and sit with the unknown, it is the courage of doing so that builds confidence from the ground up. Courage comes first, confidence comes second. This doesn't mean that we have to dive in at the emotional deep end and risk overwhelming ourselves. But it does mean that we must recognize how fear helps us to perform at our best and that we need to change our relationship with that fear so that we no longer need to eliminate it before we try. We learn to take fear with us. Here is the learning model Luckner and Nadler, 1991, that we can use as a guide for building confidence. Note down what aspects of your life might be in the comfort zone, what tasks feel challenging but manageable, and which things you would put in the panic zone. Every time you step into the stretch zone, you are doing the work of building your confidence by flexing your courage. When you are trying to build self-confidence, it is a process of building self-acceptance, self-compassion, and learning the value in vulnerability and fear. It is number 2C, and a balancing act that doesn't always feel easy. Along the way, all of the tools in this book can be used, as they each help to build up your capacity to both lean into number 1 effort and tolerate the discomfort, then pull back and replenish. Figure 8, the learning model Luckner and Nadler, 1991. Some of the main ingredients for that leap of faith we need for stepping into the stretch zone are recognition that you can improve with number 1 effort. Willingness to tolerate the discomfort of being vulnerable for a while. The commitment to yourself that you will always have your own back and do the best by yourself whether you succeed or fail. This means embracing self-compassion as a life practice and being your own coach, not your worst critic. Understanding how to move through the shame that can arise from failure to prevent our tendency to quit on our dreams in an number 1 effort to avoid the shame of a setback. See section 3 for more on this. To build confidence, we don't have to live in fear. We have to develop a daily number 2D earn of stepping into fear, see number 2D ing with it, and stepping back out, giving ourselves time to recover and replenish ready for tomorrow. See section 6 on fear. Why you don't need to work on your self-esteem. There is a whole industry built on the concept of self-esteem and the idea that if we can just believe in ourselves, we will perform number 2D and improve our relationships and our overall happiness in life. Self-esteem generally means being able to evaluate yourself positively and believe in those appraisals. Harris, 2010. So anyone trying to help you increase your self-esteem might ask you to list what you like about yourself and what your strengths are, and try to convince you to believe that you can become a success in the world. But we have a problem with the concept of success. We link it to the idea of wealth, winning, standing out and being acknowledged by others. So how do you know if you're winning? You compare yourself to others. Maybe you go online and pick any of the 4.6 billion internet users from across the world. With a pool that size, you are guaranteed to find someone who is doing number 2D than you at something. When you do, self-esteem might take a hit because if you are not the winner, you can start to see yourself as a loser instead. What if you stay number 25 in and only compare yourself to your friends and family instead? Doing that is not going to nurture healthy relationships. Associating a measure of success to worthiness would inevitably make it number 22 cult to truly connect with the people you are comparing yourself to. What happens when you lose your job and your friend gets a promotion? A review of the research by a group of psychologists showed that high self-esteem is not linked with number 2D or relationships or number 2D or performance. But it does correlate with arrogance, prejudice and discrimination. Baumeister et al., 2003. They found no significant evidence that trying to boost self-esteem through intervention had any benefits. Self-esteem cannot be relied on when it is contingent on being a success. It is psychological rent that you can never stop paying. The second you notice signs that you might be less than, you brand yourself as not enough. So you keep running on a hamster wheel of success, driven by a scarcity mindset and the fear of being inadequate. Ditch the positive affirmations. You cannot open a social media platform without coming across an number 1 F earring of daily at number 22 affirmations. The idea behind this is that if you say something to yourself enough times you will start to believe it and become it. But as it turns out, things aren't quite that simple. For those who already have high self-esteem and believe in themselves, repeating at number 22 affirmations can have a small benefit of feeling elite number 2D libby number 2D But some studies have shown that for people with low self-esteem, repeating at number 22 affirmations and statements that they don't believe, for example, I am strong, I am lovable, or being asked to focus on all the reasons that statement is true, tended to make them feel worse. Wood et al., 2009. The reason for this may be that internal dialogue we all have. If you say out loud that you are strong and lovable, but you don't believe that you are, then your inner critic will get to work coming up with all the reasons why you are not strong or lovable. The result is an internal number 2D and plenty of time to focus on all the narratives that bring you down while you are desperately trying to push them away. So what works instead? Well, the study I previously mentioned found that when those with low self-esteem were told it is okay to experience negative thoughts, their mood improved. They no longer had to number 2D with trying to convince themselves of something they didn't yet believe. Therefore, on the days when we don't feel strong, we don't need to tell ourselves that we are. We can acknowledge that feeling this way sometimes is a part of being human. We can respond to it with compassion and encouragement. We can then turn to the things that help us to feel confident in our own strength again, by using all the tools at our disposal to move through tough times in line with the person we want to be. The way that we start to believe something more positive about ourselves is to use action to create evidence for it. While at number 22, affirmations may not be the best strategy for those with low self-esteem, words still not number 2D are. If mistakes and failure lead to an onslaught of self at number 2D act, do not let any of it go unchecked. Professional athletes have professional coaches for a reason. In day-to-day life we don't have that, so we must be that voice for ourselves. The natural emotional response to failure influences our thoughts and makes us more vulnerable to self-criticism. So we can't always stop it, but we can respond to it with an alternative that serves us. Number 2D are. To build confidence, you have to get to work being your own coach instead of your own worst critic. That includes responding to failure in a way that will help you to get up, dust yourself out, number 1F, and get back out there. A professional coach would not bully you with words, or chant at number 22 affirmations that you couldn't believe in. They bring honesty, accountability, unconditional encouragement and support. They are in your corner, whatever the score, with your best interests at heart. Doing that for yourself is not always easy, but is a life skill that we can improve on with practice. Toolkit: changing your relationship with fear to build confidence. To begin building confidence in something that makes you feel nervous, you can practice welcoming the sensations of fear and number 2D-ing with them, without pushing them away. To do this, we don't have to put ourselves in a situation that causes intense panic or terror. In fact, that is not advisable. Instead, we can practice by dipping a toe in the water. Stepping slightly out of that comfort zone just enough that you can feel the stress response without feeling overwhelmed. Write down the situation in which you would like to build more confidence. Put the most vulnerable situation at the top. Then list any variations of that situation that may feel more manageable but still challenging. For example, if I want to build my confidence in social situations, I may put parties at the top of the list as the occasion in which I feel least confident. Slightly easier than that might be a party at which I know everyone. Easier than that might be a small gathering of close friends. Easier still might be going to a cafe with a trusted friend. Once you have your list, you don't start at the top. You take the scenario that presents a challenge but still feels possible. You then repeat that behavior as number 2C and as you can. Once your confidence grows and that situation becomes a comfort zone, you move up to the next thing on the list. The Perfect Nurturer is a tool originally developed by Paul Gilbert and Deborah Lee and used in compassion-focused therapy, CFT. It can be a helpful way to turn your focus towards the self-talk you need when building your confidence. A perfect nurturer is an image of a person that you can return to in order to feel safe and nurtured when that is what you need. If you prefer the idea of a coach, you can use that instead. Create an image in your mind of the perfect nurturer or coach. This could be a real or imagined person. Imagine you are sharing with them what you are currently facing, how you feel about it and what you want to work on. Take some time to imagine in detail how that perfect nurturer or coach might respond, and write it down. This sets the tone for the words you can start using to respond to yourself as you work on building your own confidence and inevitably face vulnerability along the way. Chapter Summary. Confidence cannot grow if we are never willing to be without it. To build confidence, go where you have none. Repeat every day and watch your confidence develop. Confidence is situation specific, but what you keep as you move around is a belief that you can tolerate the fear as confidence grows. You do not need to overwhelm yourself with your worst case scenario. Start with small changes. Along the way, be your own coach, not your worst critic. Courage comes before confidence. Chapter 20. You are not your mistakes. Most self-doubt is linked to the relationship we have with failure. I am not about to sit here and tell you to just be okay with failure, then everything will be easy. That is not true. Failure is never easy. It stings every time. We all want to be enough. We all want to be acceptable, and failure is a sign that maybe we weren't enough this time. It is not only our relationship with our own failure that needs to change, but also how we respond to the failure of others. You don't have to spend too long on tweet #2D or to develop an overwhelming fear of failure. Say the wrong thing in a tweet and a collective army of tweeters invade and hound you with verbal abuse, demanding you be pulled down from whatever heights you may have climbed in your lifetime. I have seen this happen to people who make simple mistakes in their use of language and immediately apologize for it. Given that social media is a magnified reflection of who we are as a society, this speaks to me about the intense shame we associate with any form of failure. Those who are highly self-critical are more likely to be critical of others. If we believe that mistakes and shortcomings should be met with humiliation and shame, number 2D, or what the intention, how do we ever begin to be okay with taking risks and making mistakes ourselves? Something that has helped me a lot is understanding that how other people respond to my failures does not provide an accurate assessment of my personality and worthiness as a human, but instead indicates how that person relates to failure. Accepting failure is hard in environments where people at number 2D attack each other for mistakes. Number 2D, or how hostile we are towards failure collectively. Changing our relationship with failure must begin with us. Failure hurts every time, whether the environment is safe or not. Therefore, we avoid it at all costs. We quit when things get hard, we switch to an easier, safer option, or we refuse to begin at all. All of those choices are addictive because they bring that blissful sense of relief. Phew, I don't have to face that today. We do that enough times and it becomes a number 2D earn in our lives that keeps us stuck in a comfort zone that feels like treacle, with all its lethargy and lack of energy for anything. If the opposite of resisting failure is accepting it as a part of growth and learning, how do we do that? It is one thing to communicate something intellectually, it is quite another to feel it and truly believe it in the moment. Saying it is only useful if you can buy into it. Belief is everything, so we need to say something that we can buy into. Therefore, it is no use trying to convince ourselves that it is safe to fail. We cannot guarantee how others will react. There will always be critics. Not everyone is going to help you up when you fall. Our only option is to commit wholeheartedly to doing that for ourselves. Start by recognizing that coming back from failure cannot be dependent on others. Using support that is available is always a good idea, but we cannot always count on someone else being there, so commit number 2D into ourselves that we will take responsibility to tend to our wounds with compassion and dust ourselves out. Number 1F A. Number 2C or a fall is essential if our resilience is not to be dependent on others doing that for us. Bouncing back from failure. 1. Recognize the sensations in your body and signs in your urges and actions that indicate to you how you are feeling. If you find yourself using all of your favorite numbing activities, hours of TV, alcohol or social media, the sting of failure drives us to block. So even if you don't initially notice the feeling, you can notice the blocking behavior. 2. Get unstuck. Remember the story about Jim Carrey removing the mask. It had less power over him when it was not right in front of his face. We can do this with emotion by seeing it as an experience washing over us, not as who we are. If you can label the emotion, it enables your mind to take a step back from it. If you can label the pot number 2D urn of your thoughts, that will do the same thing. The account of what is going on, as told by your mind, is not a fact, but a theory, opinion, story or idea. That opinion is tinted with critical voices from your past and present, memories of feeling vulnerable or having failed. As we get to know the pot number 2D urns of those critical voices and where they may have come from, we can even give that stream of thought a name. There is Helga, giving her 2 cents. Doing this can be powerful at helping us to get some distance from the self at number 2D and giving us more choice over whether we buy into it as factual or see it as just one very unhelpful option. 3. Notice the urges to block the painful feelings and keep reminding yourself that you do not have to act on those urges. When we stop fighting emotion, but instead allow it to wash over us in all its might, it is painful and it is messy. But it also washes past. If we try to push it down and hold it under, it stays there, waiting for its chance to be processed. The opposite of blocking emotion is to be curious about it. Move towards it. Observe and notice the whole experience, all while doing step 4. 4. Soothe your way through and have your own back with the commitment of the best friend you could ever wish for. Be honest with yourself while also number 1F earring unconditional love and support. Wow, that was tough. Hold on, the best kind of friends know they cannot fix things for us. But they stand strong by our side through the whole thing. 5. Get learning. Anyone coaching a professional athlete will analyze each performance. They don't only look for what went wrong. They also look at what is working. So when the pain of the setback has been calmed, get to work on making that experience useful for you. Don't neglect to notice the things you did well. Appreciate what worked and what didn't. Be your own coach so that you can learn from the experience and move forward. 6. Return to what number 2D ers. Failure and setbacks hurt every time, but dusting number 1F and GE number 2D ing back out there may still be in line with our values. When the pain of failure is still present, it can be number 22 cult to even consider trying again. Instead we want to run and hide. Coming back to your values and the reason you are doing this thing will help you make a decision based on your best interests and the life you want to have, rather than basing that decision purely on the pain. That being said, I don't want to trivialize just how much we can be overwhelmed with emotion at number 2C or failure, so take your time. It is important to work through the experience first, and try again when you are ready. Check out the chapter on values for more details, see page 284, but in the heat of the moment we don't always have time to whip out our worksheets and double check what is in line with our values. In that moment, simply ask yourself, when I look back on this time, what choices would I be proud of? What actions could I take that I will be grateful I took a year from now? How can I learn from this and keep moving forward? Chapter summary. Most self-doubt is linked to the relationship we have with failure. How other people respond to your failure does not say anything about your own personality or worthiness. The sting of failure can drive us to numb or block emotion. So even if you don't initially notice the feeling, you can notice the blocking behaviors. Be your own coach and turn failure into a learning experience as you keep moving forwards in line with what number 2D ers most to you. The emotional response to failure can be overwhelming, so take your time. Chapter 21. Being enough. The brick wall that most people hit on their way to self-acceptance is the misconception that it will cause laziness and complacency. They think that self-acceptance means believing you are okay just as you are, therefore you will have no motivation for improvement, work, achievement or change. They think that self-acceptance means believing you are okay just as you are, therefore you will have no motivation for improvement, work, achievement or change. In reality, the research shows us that those who develop self-acceptance and learn to be self-compassionate are less likely to fear failure, more likely to persevere and try again when they do fail and generally have more self-confidence. Number 1F et al., 2005. Self-acceptance and the compassion we show ourselves when we are accepting of the self is not the same as becoming number 1F errant to the world and passively resigning yourself to accept defeat when things are tough. Having unconditional love for yourself means doing the opposite sometimes. It can mean taking the more number 22 cult road because it is in your best interests. It is refusing to kick yourself while you are down or indulging in self-loathing, and instead using every ounce of strength to pull yourself back up at number 2C or a fall. The number 1F errance is that when you strive, you do so from a place of love and contentment rather than striving from a place of fear and scarcity. If we don't do the work to develop self-acceptance, we set ourselves up to live a life in which we may need constant reassurance, get trapped in jobs we hate or relationships that cause us harm, or find ourselves living with resentment. So how do we start developing self-acceptance? Understanding yourself. Sounds simple, but many people go through life without much in the way of examining their own number 2D earns of behavior that impact on their experience of life. To build self-acceptance, we first need to understand who we are and who we want to be. That comes from practicing self-awareness. We become self-aware through self-reflection. Keeping journals, going to a therapist, or talking to friends can all help us to reflect on ourselves and our experience in a way that enables us to learn more about who we are and why we do what we do. Self-acceptance involves listening to our own needs and meeting them. If we are not paying at number 2D attention, we don't always pick up on the signs. During that process, it is important to be at number 2D attentive to the parts of us that we feel proud of and the parts of us that we may prefer not to think about, the things we dislike, feel anxious or regretful about, or want to change. But when we do reflect on those more number 22 cult aspects of the self, it is crucial that we come at it with the compassion of an observer if we are to learn. If reflecting on number 22 cult situations triggers intense emotions that make it harder to think clearly, it can be helpful to get support from a therapist to help us work through it. Painting the picture of self-acceptance. Let's say that from the moment you closed this book you started living your life with unconditional self-acceptance. What would that look like? What would you do number 1 errantly? What would you say yes to? What would you say no to? What would you work harder on? What would you let go of? How would you speak to yourself? How would you speak to others? Try writing down your answers to those questions in great detail and create a vision of how the idea of self-acceptance would translate into behavior change for you. As with most changes, the action comes first and the feeling comes later. So living a life in which you feel a sense of self-worth means making it a life practice. The work is never done. Understanding yourself. So living a life in which you feel a sense of self-worth means making it a life practice. The work is never done. You never arrive. You do the work every day to live in line with unconditional self-acceptance. Accepting all of you. While you maintain a sense of self that stays with you throughout your life, you also experience a wide range of emotional states that are constantly in motion, changing from one moment to the next. We take on number 1 errant roles and behaviors in number 1 errant scenarios, and many people see those as number 1 errant parts of themselves. Depending on our early life experiences and how the world responded to those emotion states, we can feel that some parts of the self were less acceptable than others. If anger was unacceptable for you growing up, then it might feel much harder to treat yourself with compassion and acceptance when you are feeling angry. This makes self-acceptance conditional on how you feel. Try this. You can build your awareness of how you respond to various emotions and practice stepping back from them and responding to them with compassion using the following exercise that is used in Compassion-Focused Therapy, CFT, Irons and Beaumont, 2017. Spend a few moments thinking back to a recent event that triggered a mix of emotions. It is a good idea to start with something that is not too distressing so that you don't become overwhelmed while trying to practice the exercise. 1. Write down a few thoughts about the event. 2. Write down the number 1 errant emotions it brought up, for example anger, sadness, anxiety. 3. For each emotion that you identified, take one at a time, connect with that feeling and explore your answers to the following questions. 1. Where do you notice that feeling in your body? How did you know that feeling was there? 2. Which of your thoughts were linked to that feeling? If that emotion could speak, what would it say? 3. What urges came along with that feeling? If that emotion had been able to decide the outcome, what would it have made you do? For example, anxiety may have wanted you to run away, anger may have wanted you to shout at someone. 4. What does that part of you need? What would help that emotion to come back down to calm? Once you have done this for each emotion that was present, and by answering the questions for your compassionate self, the part of you that wants to show yourself unconditional love and acceptance. As you do this for each emotion, give yourself time to step back from connecting with an emotion before stepping into the next one, if there were lots of mixed emotions. Each time you do this, you are strengthening the ability to diffuse those emotions and get a good understanding of them without number 2D, being overwhelmed by them. This can be a helpful exercise for examining those mixed emotions, allowing us to see that even those emotions that we once saw as unacceptable are just normal. Each reflects a number 1 errant way of interpreting the situation, so we can come to number 1 errant conclusions about which direction to take next. Taking time to get a bird's eye view of emotional experiences like this can help us to engage with our compassion even in situations where we have been taught to be harsh on ourselves. Kicking self-criticism. What does your self-criticism sound like? What words do you use? What does it focus on? What types of things do you criticize yourself for? Appearance, performance, personality traits, comparison. Certain forms of self-criticism can be more damaging than others. Sometimes self-criticism can take the form of telling yourself that you are inadequate at number 2C or a failure. But when it goes further than that and you feel a sense of disgust and hate towards yourself, it is even more pervasive and shaming. Try this. This is a quick exercise that can help us get some distance from our inner critic and see it for what it is. Once you have reflected on all the number 1 errant ways you criticize yourself, take a moment to imagine that critic is a person outside your own head. What would they look like? What would their facial expression and tone of voice be as they spoke to you? What emotions would they be expressing? How does it feel to have them in front of you? What do you think might be their intention? Is this a misguided at number 2D to protect you in some way? Is this someone you would want to spend time with? Is this someone who could help you to live a happy life? And finally ask yourself, what is the impact of spending every hour of every day with that critic? Finding your compassionate side. When your inner critic has been a close but unwanted companion for most of your life, it is almost impossible to simply decide to remove them. That well-practiced action means those neural pathways are easily accessible for your brain. So that voice will speak up from time to time. What we need to do is provide ourselves with a new, healthier and more helpful voice, and then start practicing. In the same way that you made time to see and hear the inner critic, let's invite the compassionate side of you to the party. The side that wants the best for you and recognizes the harm that the self at number 2D act causes. That part of you still wants you to grow and achieve, but from a place of love rather than shame. Take some time to consider what compassionate self-talk might sound like. Remember, this is not the same as positive thinking. Someone who has compassion is honest and kind, encouraging and supportive, and wants the best for you. What words would you use when showing compassion to others? What words of compassion have others expressed to you? Bring to mind a memory of a time when someone showed you compassion. How did they look at you? What did they say? How did that make you feel? What would it be like to have access to that voice at any time? Try this. To strengthen our compassionate side, we simply have to put in some reps on a regular basis and practice. Try writing a compassionate #2D to yourself. Allow yourself to write spontaneously in the way you might write to a close friend who was number 1F earring or trying their best to change. How would you express to them that you had their back always and wished for their number 1F earring to ease? Nobody needs to read the number 2D But the process of engaging with your compassionate self and thinking through the various ways you can express that helps you to build that mental muscle to use it when you most need it. If you find yourself struggling to access that feeling of compassion for yourself, focus on someone that you love unconditionally and imagine you are writing to them, or use the words that loved ones have said to you in the past. Chapter Summary. There is a misconception that self-acceptance will cause laziness, complacency and lack of drive. In reality, the research shows us that those who develop self-acceptance and learn to be self-compassionate are less likely to fear failure and more likely to try again when they do fail. Self-acceptance is not the same as passively accepting defeat. Self-compassion number 2C involves taking the more number 22 cult road that is in your best interests. Chapter 22. Make anxiety disappear. For as long as I can remember, I have had a fear of heights. For the most part, one was able to avoid them, growing up. But when I met my now husband, we went on a trip to Italy together. We went to visit the Leaning Tower of Pisa, and as we stood looking at it, he held out 2 tickets. We were going to the top. A deep intake of breath was followed by another glance up at the tower that leans at 3.99 degrees and looks worryingly close to falling over. My heart started to beat against my ribcage and I felt sick. But the tickets were bought, so up we went. To get to the top of the Leaning Tower of Pisa, you climb the narrow stone steps that spiral around inside the tower. The ground beneath your feet is not level, and as you scale the tower you get the sensation that it is starting to fall over. At least that was my assessment at the time. With a queue of people behind me, I kept going. Once at the top, the tilt feels even worse. Everyone walked straight over to the edge to take in the view.